Trump ideology conflicts with European values, says Finland's president. Europe and Finland need to acknowledge that the United States is changing and that the US administration's ideology behind its foreign policy conflicts with our own values. I think I basically explained why that is. I feel like I have basically given a TLDR of might makes right not exactly being in alignment with European values. Finland's President Alexander Stubb said on Wednesday, European NATO members, including Finland, have been rethinking their foreign policy strategies in recent weeks. After US President Donald Trump in January inflamed tensions with his European allies over Greenland and overseas territory belonging to Denmark, I think it is very important for Europe to finally get a grip, so to speak. Europe is very fragmented. Europe is not being able to compete on the international stage as it is. It has a very fragmented political element to it. And more importantly, it has a very fragmented military. The military of the European Union is fragmented into individual nation states with their individual military industrial complexes, which stands no chance against the large-scale Chinese production, even Russian production, or the United States production. What Europe needs to do is to ditch the idea of each nation state in Europe having their own production, because each European country cannot produce weapons at the scale necessary to make it cheaper at scale, economy of scale. Which means that Europe produces weapons of the same quality as the United States at a much higher price because it's produced in smaller quantities. And that is a thing that Europe has to very urgently address, and quite frankly is having problems with that because there are countries in Europe that see any sort of streamlining, any sort of federalization as a threat to the sovereignty of the individual nation states. But that is neither here nor there. That is something that the Trump administration very much plays into and is trying to encourage by saying that the European Union is trying to destroy European culture, is trying to destroy European values, that white Europeans are being replaced via immigration, and that it's better to just do business with individual European nation states instead of the European Union. Basically pushing for an undoing of the European Union. European NATO members, including Finland, have been rethinking their foreign policy. We already read that. President Donald Trump in January inflamed tensions with his European allies over Greenland. Finland will update its foreign and security policy doctrine to reflect the changes in the international situation, Stubb told members of parliament in a speech. We must honestly acknowledge that the United States is undergoing change, its approach to its allies. And by that I mean the United States treats its former allies as enemies, so Europe, for example, and it treats its political opponents as friends, like Russia, which is why Trump treats Vladimir Putin, a ruthless dictator, as a good friend, has long, good phone calls with him every week, and is looking to do lucrative business with Russia when it comes to the rare earth minerals, because as I have stated a couple of times when speaking of the Russia-US relations, Russia is in the possession of 10% of the global reserves of rare earth minerals, but Russia exports only 2% of those rare earth minerals. And that is because Russia is not very good at refinement, but is also not good at the excavation of those minerals. And here is where Trump hopes to swoop in with American companies that have the expertise when it comes to excavation as well as refinement of those minerals. And the war in Ukraine is basically just an obstacle to Trump's plans when it comes to Russia. So we must acknowledge that how the United States is conducting foreign policy is that it's changing. He said calling the US nevertheless an important ally, because the United States at the end of the day is the most powerful country in the world. And it's very difficult to just decide they are not our allies anymore. We are in conflict with the United States, especially for the fragmented European Union that we have today. Stubb has sought to maintain close relations with Trump to seek his support for Ukraine, which is not working at all. That is just not working. Stubb has sought to maintain close relations with Trump, support for Ukraine, and to boost Finland's own security as a neighbor to Russia. The foreign policy of the current US administration is underpinned by an ideology that conflicts with our own values, Stubb said, giving as examples of such conflicts of values the US undermining the existing international order, so undermining the idea of rules-based order, of international law, of the idea that a neighbor cannot just invade its smaller neighbor and grab territory, operating outside international institutions and downplaying the importance of Europe, basically treating it as just a collection of individual states. Stubb gave no timeline for the foreign and security policy review, but said the work with the government was only beginning. And I echo these sentiments. Europe must distance itself from Trump's cabinet. It must unfortunately distance itself from the United States and possibly seek allies elsewhere. It definitely has to get a grip and consolidate within. I think it's time for more federalization within the European Union, and I think it's definitely time to create a unified European military. And it's time to step up when it comes to support of Ukraine. These are the necessary prerequisites to actually being able to loudly and boldly say that Europe opposes Trump's agenda when it comes to international relations. Otherwise, it will just be a hollow condemnation which will not lead to anywhere, which unfortunately there's a possibility that that is exactly what will happen. It will end up in the European Union just very hollowly trying to condemn Trump's undoing of the world order, but won't do anything about it. Let's hope that will not be the case. But as always, I'm Polish, so I do not hold my breath. I am a very negative person.